Okay, guys and gals, listen up. We're going to talk about the real number line. You guys know that it has the integers on it, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4. And you know there are fractions in between all of these. Everything on this line is real. And that means that it's either rational, which means you can write it in as a fraction, or irrational. You cannot write it as a fraction. Or see the word ratio? Oops, I stopped a little early. Ratio is a fraction, so rational is something that can be made like a ratio. Irrational is not a ratio. Okay, what can you do on this line? Do you understand that if we're adding, if I take any two numbers on the number line, the real number line, and I add them together, will I get another number somewhere on that line? Hopefully your answer was yes. Yes. You can add any two of these numbers and you're going to get another number on the number line. What about subtraction? Hopefully you said yes again. Now, not going to go into an in-depth explanation. You should just understand if you subtract any one of these numbers from any others that you'll still be on that line. What about if you multiply? And I'm going to use the dot for multiply. If I multiply two of these numbers, will I get something on the number line? And the answer is yes once again. This is ditto marks here, means same thing as what's above it. Now if I divide, will I always get another number on the number line? Can you divide any two? And hopefully you understand the answer is no, because division by 0 is not allowed. Dividing by 0, we don't get an answer. That's why your calculators say error. So at this point, there's only one thing you can't do with the real numbers, and that's divide by 0. Is there anything else you can't do with the real numbers? And the answer is yes. There's one other thing you can't do, and we're going to go to another slide to do this. As soon as I figure out how to do it, I want to move to the next slide. Hold on. Okay, that took me a few seconds, but I figured out how to do it. Okay. You know that when you square x squared, that means if x is positive, then you have a positive times a positive, and the answer is positive. If x is negative, then you have a negative times a negative, and the answer is positive. So you should understand, therefore, that you cannot get a negative. No square is negative. Okay? So if you can't get a negative when you square, the square root of something like minus 16 doesn't make sense. you can't get an answer as long as you stay on the real number line. And that's what this is about. Moving to the next slide. Okay, what are we going to do when we want to take the square root of a negative? Well, we could just say, well, it's not possible and forget it. But it turns out that, in fact, these numbers do have some practicality in electricity and magnetism. And people smarter than us have figured out a way to work with them. And you're going to feel like I'm kind of tricking you here, but here's what we do with numbers like this. We go back to the old thing where, the square root of 10 can be broken up into square root 2 times square root 5. So we just take the square root of minus 1 times the square root of 16. This becomes the square root of minus 1 times 4, or 4 times the square root of minus 1. And we've done something with it. Well, you should see that anytime I have a negative number underneath the radical sign, I could do the same thing. Remove the square root of minus 1. The square root of a negative amount is the entire problem here. Now, what you have to do basically is, even though you can't conceptualize what could that be, we don't know what it looks like other than what we're looking at right here. We don't, it's like stretching your mind around something that doesn't make sense based upon what you've learned before. So we basically just leave it like that, except that mathematicians have come up with a short way of saying it, and they call it I. I equals the square root of minus 1. So a number like square root of negative 16 simplifies to 4i. We take the square root of 16, and we do the square root of negative 1. We write it as I. It's a little shorter, and the reason I is used is because numbers like this, square roots of negatives, are called imaginary numbers.